Let me start by saying something that a lot of people need to hear. If you're working full-time, showing up every day, doing what you were told was the responsible path, and you still feel like you're barely staying afloat financially, there is nothing wrong with you. You're not lazy, you're not careless with money, and you didn't somehow miss the memo on how life works. What's happening right now goes beyond personal effort. Because for a growing number of people, working hard no longer guarantees financial stability. And that shift didn't happen overnight. For a long time, most of us were taught a very simple idea. If you work hard, if you stay consistent, if you do what you're supposed to do, eventually things work out. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not easily, but at least you could breathe. You could pay your bills, handle the occasional emergency, and slowly build toward something better. That promise shaped how people planned their lives. It influenced career choices, education, and even family decisions. And when that promise starts to break down, it doesn't just create financial stress, it creates confusion. Because people are still doing their part, yet the results don't match the effort. This is where a lot of quiet frustration comes from. People look around and think, I did what I was supposed to do. I showed up. I didn't take shortcuts. And yet, every month still feels tight. Every unexpected expense still causes stress. Every future plan feels fragile. That disconnect between effort and outcome is exhausting. And when no one explains why it's happening, people turn inward. They assume the problem must be personal. But that assumption is exactly what keeps this conversation incomplete. Not that long ago, working full-time came with an expectation. It didn't mean luxury. It didn't mean constant upgrades. But it did mean stability. A single full-time income could usually cover basic housing, reliable transportation, healthcare, and, at least some level of savings. You weren't immune to problems, but you weren't living one expense away from panic. That baseline mattered. Because stability creates room to think, plan, and grow. When that baseline disappears, everything becomes reactive. One of the biggest changes happened quietly. Wages stopped keeping up. People didn't stop working hard. Productivity didn't fall. In fact, productivity increased. Businesses became more efficient. Technology improved output. But wages flattened. So, over time, the connection between effort and reward weakened. You could do more, produce more, and still not move forward financially. That's not a motivation problem. That's a structural shift. At the same time, essential costs kept rising. Housing costs grew faster than incomes. Healthcare became more expensive. Education became riskier. Insurance took a bigger share. These weren't lifestyle upgrades. They were necessities. So the same paycheck had to stretch further. And eventually, it couldn't. That's why things like a car repair or a medical bill don't feel manageable anymore. Not because people failed to plan, but because there's no buffer left. And once that buffer disappears, everything feels heavier. Saving feels unrealistic. Planning feels uncertain. And stress becomes constant. In the second half of this video, we'll talk about why individuals are still blamed for changes they didn't cause, and what actually helps in this new reality. Here's where a lot of frustration comes from. Even though the environment changed, the way we talk about money didn't. People are still told things like, just work harder, just budget better, just be more disciplined. And while those things matter, They're often presented as the full explanation. So when someone struggles, the conclusion feels personal. It feels like a failure. It feels like something they did wrong. But when effort and reward drift apart, no amount of personal responsibility can fully close that gap. That doesn't mean choices don't matter. They do. It just means the conversation has been incomplete for a long time. This is also why a lot of financial advice feels frustrating right now. Much of it was built for a different environment, one where wages grew more reliably and essential costs took up less of a paycheck. Advice like, save aggressively early, buy as soon as you can, stick to the traditional path. For some people, that advice still works, but for many others, there simply isn't enough margin left to apply it. You can't budget your way out of rising fixed costs forever. You can't hustle indefinitely without burning out. And when advice ignores that reality, it starts to feel dismissive, even when it's well-intentioned. One part of this discussion that rarely gets enough attention is the mental and emotional strain. When money feels tight all the time, everything takes more effort. Planning feels risky. Decision-making feels heavier. Even small setbacks feel bigger than they should. This isn't weakness. It's what prolonged uncertainty does to people. And when that pressure gets framed as a personal failure, it adds shame on top of stress. That combination wears people down quietly. What's interesting, though, is that people are adapting, even if no one really talks about it openly. Not with dramatic moves, not with overnight transformations, but with small, practical adjustments. Some people are focusing less on chasing titles and more on flexibility and control. Others are prioritizing lower fixed costs, even if those choices don't look impressive on the surface. Some are redefining what stability means altogether, placing more value on having a cash buffer, mobility, or adaptable skills rather than traditional milestones. These aren't shortcuts. They're responses to a different environment, and they're happening quietly, without much recognition. This part matters. Adapting isn't the same as giving up. It isn't lowering standards, and it isn't abandoning ambition. It's updating the strategy. The old rules rewarded predictability. The current reality rewards adaptability. Recognizing that difference helps people stop blaming themselves and start making decisions that fit the world as it actually is, not the one they were promised. More than anything, what helps is clarity. Understanding that the challenge isn't moral or personal, it's structural. For a lot of people, the first real change isn't a big move. It's simply reassessing what stability actually means for them right now. That awareness doesn't fix everything, but it changes how people approach choices. Instead of chasing outdated benchmarks, people start asking better questions. What does stability mean for me right now? What risks are actually worth taking? What expectations need adjusting? That shift alone can relieve a surprising amount of pressure. If you're working hard and still feel like things are harder than they should be, you're not imagining it. The rules changed. Most people weren't warned. And the pressure you feel is real. Understanding that isn't an excuse. It's a starting point. And it's the first step toward navigating this new reality with less guilt, less confusion, and more clarity.